Starfield immerses players in a vast science fiction universe set in the settled systems, a region of the Milky Way galaxy in the distant 24th century. Cynics would describe it as a Skyrim in space, and as someone with hundreds of hours of playthrough, I agree with the comparison to some extent. Starfield is also a very different game. Besides reusing some of Bethesda's previously established, recognizable game mechanics and tropes, developers implemented a number of new systems and ideas, thus making Starfield, for better or worse, Bethesda's most complex game up to this point.
That is also a good point. What say you to that, Joy?
In this brand new series, I'll cover a number of Starfield related topics that I personally find interesting. And I emphasize the word personally, as this will be a deeply subjective reflection on Starfield, my experience with the game. And today's topic is a perfect example. I will discuss themes of isolation, loneliness, nostalgia, liminal spaces, and other related subjects that at first glance may not be commonly associated with an action-oriented sci-fi game. Yet, all throughout the settled systems and its countless moons, planets, and man-made habitats spanning across hundreds of light years, there is an overarching sensation of deep loneliness, a melancholic undercurrent manifested in all of its shapes and forms. The big irony is that Starfield was supposed to be more dynamic, crowded, and responsive than all the other previous Bethesda titles. Yet it also managed to achieve something quite different, in my opinion, mostly unintentionally. True, there are moments in the game that are meant to portray isolation and loneliness on a localized, smaller scale. However, I also want to discuss some of the less obvious, perhaps more abstract aspects and ideas that were almost certainly unintentional. And as a side note, production of Starfield occurred during the COVID pandemic. Remember that? This was also the time when the company grew much larger, spreading into several separate studios. According to Todd Howard, the pandemic and working from home made Starfield development very slow. And based on a number of interviews with the former developers that worked on Starfield, the studio's growing size led to a more detached, more automated development compared to previous games. So, could this have been reflected, whether consciously or not, in the game itself? I think it's quite possible. So, let's dive into the vast field of stars and see what lurks deep within the blackest sea. My name is Alec, and thank you for watching. Despite Starfield's overarching themes of hope and optimism in the shape of bright, futuristic cities and relatively safe interstellar travel, there is an undeniable sense of all-pervasive loss and tragedy, as well as uncertainty of tomorrow, deeply woven into humankind's collective psyche. In other words, I've always found the overall state of human population within the settled systems quite fragile and ultimately tragic, as it lays torn between the Faustian visions of the future and grained, fragmented memories of the disturbed past.
I don't get it.
I'm sorry, what don't you get?
Earth. Like, what's the big deal? It's just another dead world.
It's where we're all from. It was a place of beauty and unimaginable history. I cannot overstate how important it was for all of humanity.
I guess so. Maybe I need to look up more about it.
You see, there's a moment quite early in the game when we are sent to the so-called Old Neighborhood, which is what people of the 24th century call the solar system. As we approach Luna, we are offered a glimpse of our home planet, Earth, completely devoid of life.
It's all ancient history now, but the Earth lost its atmosphere. It started sputtering out into space. Humanity had about 50 years to evacuate the planet. That's kind of how the United Colonies government started, managing the exodus. Earth is more or less a dust ball now. You can occasionally find a few remnants of the world we left behind on the surface, but not much.
Now, the true reason behind Earth's demise is at this point still a mystery, as no human in the settled systems knows what exactly happened. What caused Earth's atmosphere to simply fade away? What we know is that in the year 2199, the last Exodus fleet left Earth, and the billions of people who did not evacuate in time remain stranded on the doomed planet. The mystery surrounding this apocalyptic event that in many ways lies at the core of Starfield's grand secret requires its own dedicated episode. And I'll definitely talk about it in depth, but for now, we need to note that Earth, or Old Earth, is but a distant, faded memory. Every single person that we meet in the game wasn't born on Earth, nor have they ever experienced life as we know it. Yet Earth is imitated in all kinds of ways and brought up quite frequently in conversations, often with awe and longing for a place they haven't even visited. And out of this dark, deeply traumatic experience, the loss of its home planet, humanity grew once more and established its new facade. Luminous, hopeful, eerily perfect with its neon lights and towers of glass, stretching out into the deep blue, alien skies. New Atlantis, capital of the United Colonies, is, by default, the center of new humankind. Ironically, this Apollonian vision of the future is nested within a primordial landscape of planet Jameson, resembling Earth's ancient past of endless tropical valleys and giant lizards. A brand new paradise for some future humanity, a second chance, if you will. In other words, the state of humankind as it's shown in the game in the year 2330 is far from complete. It hasn't reached its final destination, its telos. It hasn't realized its purpose, if there is any. This is a civilizational liminal stage, a moment of passage from one point to another. Yet the paradox is that, from our point of view, this is a distant future, our technological goal of space colonialism. Thus, a sense of strange, timeless nostalgia looming behind every corner. Starfield paints out a world of sleek spacecrafts capable of going beyond the speed of light, bending the laws of conventional physics, using technology that seems almost dated even to our own eyes, evoking those nostalgic days of early space exploration. Another great subject for further discussion is the meaning of the so-called NASA punk aesthetic, which is purposely grounded in realism. But in the context of today's topic, Starfield's futuristic technology, set in a slight retro framework, definitely enhances the overall sense of nostalgia. I will discuss New Atlantis more in the next chapter, but for now let's take a brief look at two other major cities, Akila and Neon, and see how they play with the themes of nostalgia in their own unique ways.
Welcome to Akila City, I guess.
Akila City, capital of the Freestar Collective. Less polished and less futuristic than New Atlantis, Akila evokes imagery of the 19th century American frontier and a more individualistic lifestyle. The interesting thing about Akila is that it was founded in 2167 by an astrophysicist and spaceship designer Solomon Coe, who, by the way, single-handedly discovered the planet using one of his own ships. I'm not really sure what inspired him to basically build Texas in space, especially in such a distant future, but this might tell us more about the state of Earth prior to the evacuation. Solomon Coe was in fact from Wyoming, which, while not exactly Texas, also has a strong frontier history. And Akila's star system is named after its capital, Cheyenne. Akila also evokes memories of medieval castles, with its massive stone walls and central keep simply called the Rock, which served as a home for the founding families, and surrounding farms basking in the hazy apricity of Akila's heavy atmosphere elevate the city's overall quasi-feudal aspect even further. Bethesda was always good at conjuring up such anachronistic yet realistic scenes in their games, by combining various historical elements and fantasy tropes. So locations like Akila undoubtedly have a subtle, sentimental effect on a player. You want to be a hero, an armored gunslinger wandering into a town and saving it from the outside threat? Akila can provide such experience. And speaking of founding families and Solomon Co., Akila has its own noble founding mythos, mirroring some of those old folk tales of heroic city founders and establishers of boundaries. It's a strong archetype, so strong in fact that Akila seems to resist any deviation from it. It remains within its boundaries. It successfully rejects the mind-numbing comfortism of New Atlantis or the decadent hedonism of Neon. It remains safe within its cyclopean walls and rugged minimalism, like a walled Garden of Eden surrounded by monsters of legends, personified by Ashta. So I find Akila's setting quite romantic. Neon started humbly as a gritty fishing platform on Valai Alpha, a hellish aquatic planet, and it still shows. It's over-engineered, worn out, labyrinthine, with numerous perpetually dark corners and dead ends, hidden behind the curtains of strong miasma. Through the discovery of a potent psychotropic substance, Aurora, found in a local fish, it transformed into a cyberpunk-inspired, corporate, dystopian, urban jungle. The Pleasure City. Now, this may sound absurd, but as crowded and loud as Neon can be, it feels strangely detached, impersonal. First of all, Neon is a single illuminate island within a planet-wide misty ocean, inhabited by literal sea monsters. It almost constantly rains, and streets are obnoxiously loud, rendering any meaningful human interaction almost impossible. Remember when we said that Starfield was developed and possibly influenced by COVID pandemic? In some ways, Neon stands as its antithesis, or a mockery. The crowd is permanent, ever-present, yet it seems devoid of a genuine human interaction. No one truly inhabits Neon. Its very nature is liminal. It's a technological island of Circe, serving as a one-time stop for a weekend of hedonistic pleasure marathon. Neon violently invades all human senses and forbids normality. And I think in that sense, this dystopian cyber island is filled with some extremely lonely souls. It also invokes nostalgia among players, in its melancholic mixture of cold rain and burning neon lights, the scent of exotic fish creeping through overcluttered wet markets, and perpetual corporate advertisements echoing through narrow, crowded streets. Neon City reminds me of Blade Runner and other vintage cyberpunk movies from the 80s and 90s. It's our memory of the forbidden cinematic future, a corrupted paradise. And before moving on to the next chapter, I also wanted to talk about another type of nostalgia. Nostalgia for the future, if such a concept even makes sense. I'd like to go back to this quote from the beginning. It's from an 18th century German poet and philosopher, Georg Philipp Friedrich von Hardenberg, also known as Novalis. I was still blind, but twinkling stars did dance throughout my being's limitless expanse. Nothing had yet drawn close. Only at distant stages, I found myself, a mere suggestion sensed in the past and future ages. So, while playing Starfield, I was reminded of this quote repeatedly, even though I haven't read Novalis basically since my youth. Much of his mystical reflections dealt with the concept of unity, and humanity's currently fragmented nature, causing a deep-rooted sense of longing and nostalgia for the golden age, both past and future. It's what drives us towards this abstract unity. Starfield obviously is very much based around the concept of unity, which may or may not be the same thing. Here in the game, unity is also manifested as a sphere at the center of the universe and a gateway to all possible realities. This is also where we, the protagonists, meet our true self, our absolute being. So while playing the main quest, I was really reminded of Novalis and his philosophical musings, even though, like I said, they could mean totally different things. Starborn are literally star-born, star-made. Then, so the twinkling stars throughout the being's limitless expanse could reference individual fragmented beings living and learning in manifold paths within the unity or the absolute self. A mere suggestion sensed in past and future ages is our potential or a possibility realized through an infinite number of variations, all serving the same goal of moving towards the unity, the point beyond space and time, from which all of these infinite possibilities are but mere dreams. Interestingly, the game contains some truly obscure references to the presence and interference of unity throughout human history. This side of the story is purposely left in the dark, but at least we do know that the enigmatic creators, beings responsible for building Starborn temples and technology, have made contact with the humans since the dawn of time. So within the context of the game, the romantic ideas of Novalis and the longing for the great unity beyond time, described as the upcoming golden age, could also be inspired by the creators. We yearn for that moment of transcendence, whether consciously or not. It's what drives us forward. Call it a progress, a return to Eden, a new kalpic cycle, or eternal return. It's embedded in our very dreams. In the previous chapter, I mentioned humanity's transitional or liminal stage in Starfield. In recent years, however, liminality and liminal spaces are often talked about and associated with the themes of loneliness, memories, especially childhood memories, nostalgia, and so-called backrooms. On a most rudimentary level, limin means threshold, and to be in a liminal state means being in a state between. As we have seen, liminality can be attributed to a great number of subjects, from mundane and trivial to more profound philosophical, mystical, and religious ideas. Liminal spaces are quite common in Starfield. I am of course talking about all those uneasy, empty, abandoned locations found throughout the settled systems, whether they are abandoned star stations, laboratories, or mines. But there are also planets themselves. Vast, almost infinite spaces of procedurally generated landscapes, varying from barren deserts to dense forests. Each map covers 64 square kilometers of terrain, and each planet and moon has, again, a seemingly infinite number of maps.
There it is. Nova Galactic Staryard, still orbiting Earth's moon. This is where the first interstellar ships were made. People still use their modules, even though their Staryard hasn't been running in forever.
Starfield's abandoned Staryards, such as the Nova Galactic Staryard, are among my favorite so-called space dungeons. They are literal embodiments of liminal spaces, titanic, maze-like structures suspended in the void, now abandoned and left to drift into oblivion. I find them quite fascinating and surprisingly relaxing. There's a sense of tranquility in here, as if stepping out of time and space, as their metallic skeletal remains float in perpetual cosmic darkness, illuminated only by distant cold stars from outside and within by soft neon lights and flickering terminals. There are fragments of past lives and memories on every step, faded motivational posters, scribbled notes, stale processed food, rusted machinery, used tools. A weight of human history is ever present, as these haunted corridors were once filled with engineers and scientists, dreaming humanity's first steps into the great cosmic unknown. Nova Galactica Staryard produced the first interstellar ships and was the beacon of technocratic optimism. These forgotten rooms hosted pioneers of distant space travel, as humankind began colonizing star system after star system. which makes them quite tragic. It's like revisiting for one last time your semi-forgotten childhood dream or a memory of being a brave astronaut. A dream once bright and full of longing, now somber and melancholic, moved into the realm of abandoned utopias at the threshold of our consciousness. But so are the countless abandoned factories, laboratories, military barracks, and outposts, spread throughout the hundreds of star systems. The amount of clutter and level of detail in each of them really bring these desolate locations to life. Planets, on the other hand, offer an incredible sense of vastness, which isn't that surprising since this is a space game. I've already said that each map is 64 square kilometers. For comparison, this makes them much larger than a map of Skyrim. Obviously, they lack the corresponding level of detail, as they are simply small chunks of planet's surface, with the intention of simulating the real scale of these cosmic bodies. Whether it's a barren, devoid of any life piece of rock, or a lush forest teeming with life. Starfield's planets, if anything, make me feel small. I'm not very familiar with the technical aspect of the game, but I believe that every planet offers an unlimited number of explorable maps. First of all, we can land on any point by simply clicking on the surface. However, due to technical limitations, the game can memorize only a certain number of generated maps. So, in theory, by simply revisiting the same planet over and over, we will generate an endless amount of terrain variations, all vaguely similar yet at the same time unique. And this too can cause a bittersweet scenario. At least in my case, sometimes I'll simply fall in love with a map. I'd find a special corner on some lonely mountain, or a cozy tree from which I can overlook a hazy valley, and just by knowing that this particular spot, or a location, or a view, will be gone forever, immediately makes me nostalgic about it. One way of forcing the game memorize a map is by building an outpost. However, even this option offers a fairly limited number. My point being, if you love nature, long walks, exploration, and searching for that perfect view, you'll find it, but it will be only temporary. Nothing is permanent. So there's a bittersweet touch of transience in Starfield, living in the moment. Another, perhaps more obscure quality of Starfield's planets, and specifically randomly generated maps, is their theoretical infinite potential, or what I love calling meta potential. As we know, Bethesda games come with construction sets, tools allowing anyone to design their own mods, from creating a simple NPC to designing entire settlements and scripted events. In theory, again, this means that each generated map could contain a single open-world map larger in size than Skyrim. This opens up a whole spectrum of possibilities. Last I heard, there are already projects aiming at recreating the entire world of Tamriel, and in reality the sky is the limit. It probably won't happen as it requires an incredible amount of work, but theoretically speaking, the possibility is there. So in a way, I always viewed these vast landscapes as canvases as well, adding to their liminal nature. Their raw, primitive beauty can also be reshaped or redesigned into, well, anything. Any discussion on Starfield's liminal spaces would be incomplete without mentioning cities, especially New Atlantis. I know I will focus on this city a lot today, and perhaps it is my favorite, but in terms of offering unusual urban liminal spaces, New Atlantis is by far the most interesting to analyze. First of all, New Atlantis is labeled as the most technologically advanced city the human race has ever conceived and constructed. The game version of the city is, for gameplay purposes, scaled down, as is the case with all Bethesda settlements, so nothing new there. Therefore, the actual size of New Atlantis is unknown, but it is undoubtedly intended to be massive. Now, this is just my personal headcanon, if you will, but I believe that New Atlantis largely reflects the state of Earth's megacities prior to the global disaster and evacuation. For context, New Atlantis was founded in the year 2160, only 4 years after the first arrival in the Alpha Centauri star system, and the last Exodus ship, as we already said, left Earth in 2199, while Earth officially became uninhabitable in 2203. And since the game is set in the year 2330, there's a period of 170 years between the founding of New Atlantis and the present time. The first colonists, in fact, lived in an underground area called the Well, which is still found in the game. It's a sprawling, rundown underbelly filled with seedy shops and bars, and if the bright glass towers of the surface symbolize Utopia and humanity's enthusiasm, the Well very much represents its critique.
Do I look like a barista to you?
I'm pretty sure that New Atlantis was largely inspired by Walt Disney's concept known as Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. Perhaps it's not that well known that the genesis of everyone's favorite Disney theme parks has much deeper roots than mere entertainment. Walt Disney was pretty serious about designing a genuine utopian futuristic city, featuring commercial, residential, and other centers and parks, all connected by monorail. Now, Walt Disney wasn't the first nor the last guy with such an idea. In fact, New Atlantis as an ideal, scientific utopian city of the future appears in a 17th century novel by an English philosopher, Francis Bacon, all based, of course, on ancient Greek philosopher Plato. And by the way, there's a secret agent codenamed Plato somewhere in New Atlantis. But this rabbit hole is perhaps for some other time. My point is that the entire city of New Atlantis, its very concept, is a manifestation of our own centuries-long vision of a perfect futuristic city, with a healthy dose of cynicism included. And this is why New Atlantis may appear so fake. There are so many wonderfully weird little corners, both open and semi-hidden, just oozing with liminal vibes. For instance, public art installations serving also as children's playgrounds have a really eerie vibe, as they are kind of abandoned even though they are in the heart of the residential center. Oversized lobbies drenched in looping, synth-heavy, surprisingly wistful music echoing throughout the long nights. Plenty of stores and cafes with futuristic interior designs. Or what about these permanently empty rooms inside residential towers with minimalistic design elements? They look almost misplaced, as if we suddenly stepped from a futuristic sci-fi game onto a mid-20th century set.
Not now. Can't you see how busy I am?
We have so little time together recently.
After the project's over, I'm taking a vacation. A long one.
Let's stay in New Atlantis for a while. What also differentiates Starfield from previous Bethesda games is the overwhelming presence of generic, unnamed NPCs. Yeah, these guys.
Scientifically speaking, terraforming is a more important advancement than space travel.
There's definitely an argument for both.
Frankly, what's the point of graph jumping to new planets if we can't even breathe the air?
Cities are filled with them, aimlessly wandering around like some movie extras. Their role is to obviously fill in the streets, creating the illusion of a crowded urban space. They barely have any dialogue, have no home, and possess the uncanny ability to stare into your very soul. I remember exploring New Atlantis for the first time and having this feeling of strange loneliness creeping in. I think it was caused by being surrounded by hordes of NPCs yet having no one to actually talk to. It felt like one of those recurring dreams of my own. Dreams of wandering unnamed cities, floating through crowds of faceless humanoid forms. Whether it was a day or a night, a street or a train station, there was a prevailing zen-like quality to this experience. I felt like the center of the universe, a cosmic awareness thrown into some kind of simulation. Well, that's how I also feel when exploring the streets of New Atlantis. Now, to be honest, this might be because, as a long-term fan, I'm used to more personal, interactive world designs typical for vintage Bethesda. In Skyrim, for example, every NPC has a personal story attached to it. Every citizen a distinct role, regardless of how insignificant it may be. And there were those who criticized this approach, claiming that Bethesda towns are simply too small, basically overgrown farms. Too unrealistic, they said. Personally, I'm a fan of vintage Bethesda, although I also understand the need of crowding cities like New Atlantis. Starfield is in many ways more city-centric, and New Atlantis is Bethesda's most ambitious urban design experiment. I guess I'd only like more unique, lifelike characters, and there are some, don't get me wrong, and they do make a huge difference.
Anyway, yeah, I'd like to be a banker. It'll be fun. Because magic isn't real, which means I can't be a necromancer. I figured being a soul-sucking banker was the next best thing.
Muria Sierkiewicz, for instance, is proof that Bethesda still has what it takes to write an interesting, memorable side character.
Spite fuels me. Spite and beer.
She can be found in the Gal Bank, looking to become a banker, only because being a necromancer is impossible.
I want to raise a pet, but only because an army of skeletons is out of the question.
And as a small side note, her dialogue is interesting because magic, in a way, is real, and there are Starborn powers that basically function the same as necromancy. Too bad we cannot recruit her as a companion, though.
I'm a morning person. Just a regular ball of sunshine.
So while there are fun side characters peppered throughout the settled systems, there are simply too few of them. I do actually have another headcanon, and this one is more of a joke and not to be taken seriously, but sometimes I wonder if all these generic unnamed NPCs are in fact clones or androids, perhaps with some false memories embedded in their plastic brains, like Blade Runner. For once, their design is much less detailed compared to unique characters, giving them that synthetic look. And also, they are all really just blatant copies. And spoilers alert, secret cloning technology does exist in Starfield, so you never know. Jokes aside, the subject of loneliness in Starfield could easily be one of its main topics or narratives. It's really all-pervading. There's a good number of side quests involving characters being lost, whether literally or existentially, or just trying to survive in the farthest, most remote corners of the settled systems. On that topic, one of my main miscellaneous side quests involves a girl named Sivan from a Martian town of Cydonia. Her quest is almost hidden, as it's fairly easy to miss, but it portrays such a genuine human experience. A mundane, slice-of-life storyline that is, like I said, found too rarely in this game. Sivan is first encountered in Cydonia's community center, visibly troubled about something.
If you were pressured into making a promise, is it wrong to break it?
I see. Is this person someone you care about?
You might say that. It's complicated. I came to do a little good old-fashioned soul-searching. You'd think it'd be easy to find, given it's my soul. But nope. Turns out it's a lot harder than it looks.
Now, after a short, somewhat cryptic exchange about soul-searching and looking for a quiet place, her story will seemingly end, as there's nothing more to talk about. However, after a couple of days, she can be found leaning over the fence near the Martian face statue, frozen in thought. This time, Sivan will open up some more about her childhood and family.
Anyway, if you're wondering why I'm out here, I wanted to find a North Star. In the old world, whenever they got lost, sailors would look to a pole star to guide them. I guess that's what I'm looking for. A compass. Something to point me in the right direction.
Her father is an executive in a highly influential Deimos company and wants Sivan to follow in his steps. She, however, doesn't want to live her father's dream, but her own.
Well, that's the thing. Even with a clear view, Mars doesn't have a North Star. True North sits between two constellations, Cygnus the Swan and Cepheus the King. Depending on which way Mars tilts, it'll be one or the other eventually. Me? I like Cygnus. I'd point you to it, but it's hard to see anything behind all this obstruction.
And her only request is, in fact, quite simple. Sivan wants to see the Martian North Star once again. It's at this exact point when this particular storyline won me over. I'm not even sure why, but I was always fascinated with our own lore about the star Polaris and its symbolism and meaning throughout human history. So discovering Sivan's story felt really personal. After taking her up into the orbit, Sivan will decide to leave Mars and start a life of adventure. We don't know where or how, as she will then mysteriously disappear from the game forever.
Wow, so this is space? It's so big. But I think I can see Cygnus. It's a lot clearer up here.
In a way, Sivan and her quest feel like uncovering an ancient Bethesda artifact from the days of more subtle and effective writing. It's one of the rare quests that are not thrown into our face by activating the journal's quest log right away, but instead require the player's active involvement. We have to seek out Sivan instead. And all it takes are 10 minutes of entertaining, emotional dialogue, layered with some light existentialism. I keep repeating myself, but Bethesda truly excels at writing these mundane, slice-of-life stories and random characters that help bring the game world to life. Other, more obvious cases exposing daily loneliness and isolation in Starfield's universe are too many to count. For example, both New Atlantis and Cydonia portray scenes of bored children, not having anyone to play with. But the game also entertains the idea of loneliness on a deeper, meta level through the story of the Starborn. Now, the Starborn require their own episode, so I won't delve deeper into their lore today, except for noting that the life or very existence of a Starborn comes with a heavy existential loneliness, at least at this stage. The case of the Hunter, game's main antagonist, pretty much says it all. Imagine American gladiators as spacefaring, superpowered beings whose only goal is collecting alien artifacts in order to progress to the next level. Everything about the Starborn, their equipment, goals, their very purpose, is laser focused on a single point, obtaining power and reaching the unity. Again and again. In a never-ending cycle of rebirths and metaphysical crusade through the omniverse.
It means I've seen thousands of universes, collected their artifacts, been to their temples. You have a small taste of their power, but it keeps going.
And the great irony is that no one really knows what awaits at the end, at that transcendent point of singularity. What is the final gift? The Hunter's character showcases the pinnacle of Starborn's mystical hierarchy. He is at the top of the pyramid, arguably the most powerful and oldest, but also most devoid of all human conditions, besides an insatiable predatory thirst for absolute power. His nihilistic philosophy is raw, reduced to the most fundamental principle of might makes right. And overall, Starborn as a whole can be viewed as cosmic ascetics detached from humanity. Even Starborn suits come in one piece. Unlike other spacesuits, we, the player, can't simply remove the helmet and expose our human face, as if it's truly symbolizing the process of ongoing depersonalization. There is something truly depressing, terrifying, and existentially dreadful about the Starborn. Even the aesthetic of their spaceships, called Guardians, reflect this weird cosmic brutalist minimalism. They remind me very much of the 80s retro futurism, and I can easily imagine entire cities made in this brutalist style, somewhere in the farthest reaches of the universe.
I was also human once, but what does it matter who or what I was when eternity is within your grasp?
And finally, I also think that Starborn, and especially the Hunter, reference us, the players. The Hunter is someone who beat the game. He only finds pleasure in chaos, messing around, gaining experience and speedrunning. In dialogues, he constantly talks about being bored of it all and just waiting. And for the Starborn, dying could simply mean being respawned. So there's a definite meta aspect to the Starborn lore, and I actually find it brilliant.
Waiting. I do a lot of that these days, but the shortest path to a goal sometimes requires patience.
Ironically, the Hunter at times provides some of the best, insightful dialogue compared to the generic, robot-like greetings, typical for mindless NPCs. Regardless of his philosophy, he truly feels more aware, constantly standing at the threshold of breaking the fourth wall.
Better to just let people be. A single person achieving their own ends is at least honest. Helping people is just another form of control. Ah, there I go again. I was in danger of waxing philosophical last time, and now I'm knee-deep in it. I should stop while I'm ahead. I'll catch you around.
And with that, we came to an end. This was my first Starfield analysis, and I hope to further explore some of the subjects mentioned here, like the Starborn lore and what it all means. Game has lots of other mysteries too, and I think they are worth talking about. Anyways, like I said at the beginning, this was more of a personal analysis, my experience with Starfield. So I hope you enjoyed the video, even if it was, well, a bit more personal and out there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.